pros and cons of obtaining a private eval. I would say that the the cons definitely, most of the times, if you don't go to Krista and you know how to ask for an ECCS for a private evaluation cost by the school district, you would have to pay for it. Although there's other ways that you can have a private evaluation, maybe not necessarily paying it in full. So maybe you can do the like for the psychoeducational assessment, you have the psychological portion and then you have the educational portion, right? So maybe for the psychological portion, you can go and do it through your insurance, like in network, and then you can pay for the educational portion, or you can even ask the school to do it. So that's kind of a combination eventually if you want to pay for the full evaluation like privately. But for the pro, I would say that the number one pro is to truly have a deep understanding of your child's learning or of your child's, I would say, like overall development, right? I would say that would be one of the pro, to truly understand your child, what's going on with your child, what are the different causes that can be underneath that maybe you didn't think about, to get a diagnosis, if any, or different diagnosis compared to a public school that you won't get a specific diagnosis. Some people want a diagnosis to finally say, oh, I know, and I get that from a lot of parents. Oh, I finally know why my child's doing X or Y, and that diagnosis helps. Sometimes if you get a diagnosis, that it's also gonna serve to get services covered through the insurance, right? So if you have autism, then your insurance is gonna cover for the behavioral therapy. Or so that's kind of part of a pro too, that you can get services through your insurance thanks to having a diagnosis.
In some cases, the person is more credentialed, right? So that can be their experience, not in all cases, because
not in all cases,
sometimes they actually are credentialed equally to a private provider, but depending on who the school psychologist is that is assigned, they might be more credentialed. And that only becomes relevant and important depending on the evaluations and specialty required in evaluating your particular child and the purposes in the evaluation itself. Yeah. So there is a certain level of individuality to these considerations.
Absolutely.
Definitely one of the things that deter parents can be the cost, right?
Yeah. That's why.
And
that's
so in that scenario, in that scenario, I tell parents, all right, well, let's get the school district to evaluate, and then let's request an IE if you disagree with it. And we'll talk more about that later.
Okay.
Another thing I want to bring up actually before we change the slide. Some parents are paranoid about having the school district evaluate their child. And they believe that the school district, even if it's a school psychologist that has not yet met their child and is not stationed at their specific school, but travels among 4 or 8 schools, they have an idea that the school psychologist is going to be tipped off by the teachers with a certain agenda. And they feel paranoid about that, or they don't feel like they can speak frankly about their own family dynamics or the child's history. I have a client who experienced trauma with the school district. I'm not even exaggerating. They both had disabilities themselves, and they were mislabeled as emotionally behaviorally disordered, and they were not. One has dyslexia and the other had a speech impairment, and that was alone a speech impairment. And so they are, no matter what I could tell them, it's an absolute no. It doesn't even matter. So it is individual to a point. I do tell parents, these school psychologists, they have ethics that they need to meet. Of course, we can always be conspiratorial about anything. Many people believe that COVID wasn't real and it was a setup. There's only so far that we can get with the conspiratorial type of thinking. I do believe that maybe once in a million times, or I don't know, that maybe some of that goes on, but they do have to meet professional standards, and they do need to evaluate according to the protocols that are in place for each evaluation measure. And if they were to push forward a teacher's agenda to have a child in a certain kind of a classroom, then that would not be appropriate. I do want to add something else right now, because this is so important and it might be a little off topic. I have seen recommendations that are not appropriate for a psychologist to make in both private reports and school district reports. I have seen private psychologists recommend certain schools that they have a connection with that refer them business. This is very inappropriate to make such determinations. I also have seen, public school psychologists recommend more restrictive placements instead of recommending what the child requires. That is not appropriate for many different reasons. And one of them is that they've predetermined placement without allowing the parent to participate in the educational team, which is a violation of IDA. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, and if you have more questions about that, we can certainly talk about it, but I would run away from an evaluation that says the child needs to be in a special day school or lists off a particular special day school, or makes a determination that the student needs to be only around other children with disabilities without any real basis. Mm-hmm. This is really inappropriate.
Of course, and part of the pros that I also think for a private eval is that you're not going to get only recommendations for the school itself, but also you're going to get kind of an action plan, right? Like, what are the specific needs of the child, and what are the next steps you should do as a parent in order to help your child succeed. So it's not going to be just related to what's going on in school, but in, at home or in any other areas.
The other thing that is not appropriate is that I fight all the time that I don't think is appropriate is when the school district does an evaluation and they provide a report and the recommendation says, refer to the M team, the multidisciplinary team, mm-hmm. or the IEP team. Why that to me is putting it off to, I understand that it's a team decision about all aspects of eligibility and the IEP, but you are a professional conducting an evaluation and you should have specific recommendations to help a child. You are the qualified person to do this evaluation. So let's not put it off on the M team or the IEP team and say, here's the scores, you make a decision. We're all equal members and you actually happen to be the person that did the evaluation. I have actually requested an IE on that basis alone. Mm-hmm.